Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third match of Sootopolis City League Week 7. I am Schmidt, and with me I have Poker. We're going to be watching an incredibly interesting match between the Lunala Dream Eaters and the Sunsteel Strikers. It'll be certainly very interesting to see how both of these teams go out and seeing both the records compared to one another.
Yeah, definitely. Today we're watching a Spike Myth game between AngeloHunter and WarhyangVGC. So two very strong players here. Both of them fighting to secure at least a draw for their team, considering the score is 3-3 at the moment. So these last two matches for both teams are going to be super important.
Yeah, definitely. And taking a look, obviously, like you said, 3-3, this is a very close set between both of these teams. And seeing the records, Sunsteel Strikers is vying for that 4-2 record that everybody desires, and Lunala Dream Eaters is trying to avoid that, staying ahead of the pack and staying far ahead of everybody else that could potentially even threaten their spot. So it'll be really interesting to see what AngeloHunter and WarhyangVGC bring out here to try to give their team an advantage.
Yeah, so we see here on AngeloHunter's end, quite a few achievements, especially on the online era. NPA runner-up with the Blizzards in Series 12, USPA third team with Kansas and Missouri for Series 12, so super good results on him there. And then also a 2 times Victory Road World Cup team member with Team Ireland, both in Series 10 last year and Series 12 this year. And he's got a very interesting take on Rain here. No kind of swift swim sweeper like we often see in Spike Myth with something like a Kingdra, instead going for like a more bulky approach with Serena and Ferrothorn along with the Polytoad.
Yeah, Ferrothorn we've seen even in restricted formats be very well kept on a Rain team. Obviously, it appreciates the 50% damage decrease of fire-type attacks being its 4 times weakness, and being able to really cover a lot of the potential weaknesses that could be found on a Rain team, obviously having mostly water types. On Warhyang's side of the field, we have an incredibly esteemed competitor being the 2018 Korean National Championship, alongside being a Showdown Ladder first place member in the Spike Month format itself just recently. He's also a 2 times Worlds competitor, and on his side of the field, we have the very well-known trio of Urshifu, Incineroar, and Rillaboom, alongside some interesting picks like the bulky Porygon 2 and the Landorus Incarnate. Base Sylveon, obviously, we know with Pixelate and Hyper Voice, it can just do an incredibly large amount of damage in a very short period of time, alongside the bulky picks of Porygon 2, and we've seen fairly bulky Landoruses in Spike Myth recently, so it'll be very interesting to see what that set is. And as we get into this game, it'll be really interesting to see the combination of both of these teams facing off against each other just because of how different these playstyles are. We see one side of the field focusing down on a lot of the weather aspect, and the other side being more generally covering, as the first Pokemon to hit the field are going to be that Urshifu Rapid Strike alongside the Rillaboom, and on Angelo's side, it'll be Urshifu Rapid Strike and the Incineroar. A battle of incredibly strong Pokemon that we have seen just utterly dominate this format so far.
Yeah, definitely. And both leads pretty good for both players here. You got Incineroar to pressure the Rillaboom first turn, and then you got the Urshifu to pressure the Incineroar on the other side. However, the Urshifu on Angelo's side is a little bit in a tricky situation here. Could just trade Fake Outs turn 1, but you do run the risk of having Rillaboom just go for damage right away. If you Fake Out the Urshifu with your Incineroar, you do stop the attack, but it might be a little too much damage you're taking turn 1. So interesting to see what plays out here first turn.
Yeah, and as we're seeing on the screen right now, actually, it'll be interesting to see what Warhyang does in order to bypass the potential Zarina switch in, because of the ability for Zarina to block any sort of fake out or priority move, as Zarina is going to be hitting the field here, trying to stop any potential fake outs from Rillaboom, but that's not going to come out as Urshifu goes for the U-turn. Super effective hit, doing almost half damage to Rillaboom, giving Angelo the ability to pivot and really giving a fair amount of damage right at the beginning. Incineroar is going to be re-hitting the field, dropping another round of Intimidates onto both of these physical attackers and really making a massive impact in just this first turn.
Yeah, it is interesting to see that Warhyang did call out the Serena switch in here, goes for a U-turn of his own. Not too much damage considering the 2 Intimidates that came out from the Incineroar, and takes some Rocky Helmet chip as well. So pretty decent for AngeloHunter here, but WarhyangVGC does get a pivot in with the Rillaboom slot.
Yeah, definitely. And as we saw, with all of that chip damage from the U-turn and the Rocky Helmet, Rillaboom is already fairly low, as Urshifu right off the bat is going for a close combat into the Zarina slot, which was Incineroar prior. Not going to do a massive amount of damage just because of the 2 Intimidates. However, is going to be hit with a sizable chunk back from Rocky Helmet, dropping Zarina to slightly below half health, but overall a very good turn for Angelo.
Definitely, and Serena's also very threatened by the Landorus here. Now that you've got a bit of chip on it, even the Assault Vest variant isn't going to like taking that Sludge Bomb, so interesting to see how AngeloHunter plays around this very threatening Landorus.
Yeah, and as we've seen, you know, with the sheer force ability on Landorus Incarnate, just the sheer amount of damage that it can do is threatening to so many different Pokemon in this format, threatening even the Incineroar with a potential Earth Power coming out, not being affected by grassy terrain like a potential Earthquake would. So it'll be very interesting to see what this Landorus tries to do, just because of how much pressure it is putting on the field right now.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like AngeloHunter just decides to stop the Landorus going for any type of attack with a Fake Out here. WarhyangVGC does switch out into Incineroar, so potential Fake Out on the next turn if Serena is taken off the field.
Yeah, and Incineroar coming in here, dropping the power of a potential triple Axle from the Zarina slot. However, that's not going to come out. Instead, Zarina is going to U-turn, trying to keep that possible priority pressure on the field as Incineroar goes for a Fake Out into Landorus, and not making a massive impact on the turn. However, both sides of the field were really able to get in the Pokemon that they wanted and have caused this very interesting matchup dichotomy where both of these Incineroars are facing each other down, one with Fake Out pressure, the other one without, and the Urshifu and the Landorus both just staring each other down, trying to make something work. And it'll be very interesting to see if either side of the field is able to really capitalize on this incredibly offensive forces that are on the field right now.
Yeah, it feels like whoever's able to knock out the Grass type first here is going to be in a pretty good spot. If you knock out the Rillaboom for AngeloHunter's end, then you're able to just get in your Urshifu and just start attacking without worrying about the Grassy Glide whatsoever. And if you manage to knock out the Serena on WarhyangVGC's end, then you're able to just go for the priority Fake Outs or any other type of priority move you might want to use.
Yeah, definitely, and that's something we've seen that's really in line with the format. These grass types are coming into play not only because of their incredibly strong move pools and abilities and such, but also just to counter Urshifu directly. As a Surging Strikes is going to come out from Angelo's side of the field into the opposing Urshifu, going to do a decent chunk of damage overall. Not a terrible move, but the opposing Incineroar is going to be going for a U-turn into the Zarina slot, doing a very good amount of damage, leaving Zarina with just 17 HP. Incineroar, of course, taking some Rocky Helmet chip damage of its own. However, getting this Zarina off the field permanently, like you said, is going to be incredibly beneficial for WarhyangVGC's side of the field, especially his Urshifu.
Yeah, definitely. And it is interesting to see that the Incineroar here manages to go for a U-turn instead of, say, a parting shot. So maybe leaning into an assumption for AngeloHunter that it could be an Assault Vest variant.
Yeah, that is incredibly possible. We've seen that with the Assault Vest item, Incineroar just has so much versatility. Obviously, its move pool has so many possible options with the Flare Blitz, a very strong Dark type move, or a Snarl, or a U-turn. There's just so many options that having that item brings upon it, or there's the possibility of it not even having that item. So Incineroar obviously being something that is just so omnipresent and synonymous with VGC, really. It'll be interesting to see what it does here as Zarina goes for the Helping Hand onto Urshifu on Angelo's side of the field, going for that Surging Strikes into probably the opposing Urshifu. No, actually into the Rillaboom, hoping that with the combination of Helping Hand and the critical hits that it'll be able to get the KO on Rillaboom. However, that will not be the case, leaving Rillaboom with just a little bit of health, as both of these grass types are now on their last legs, as the opposing Rillaboom goes for the U-turn into Zarina, finally able to take down that Rillaboom, or that Zarina. However, it's going to be taken down itself by the Rocky Helmet, the exact grass trade that really just keeps the stalemate of this game, so on and so forth, as WarhyangVGC's Urshifu goes for the Surging Strikes into Angelo's Urshifu, giving it a little bit of chip damage of its own, and really this game is just as much of a stalemate as it was before this turn.
Yeah, I would say on AngeloHunter's end, you're probably happy taking that trade because now that the Rillaboom's off the field, you get a lot of pressure with your Urshifu onto both the Landorus and the Incineroar that we've seen. So that slot should be perfectly safe to just go for Surging Strikes into. If you can manage to take out the Urshifu later on in the game, then you should be able to lock this one up.
Yeah, definitely. And something to keep in mind also is that Angelo hasn't exposed his last Pokemon yet. Warhyang has to play with the assumption that it could either be Politoed or Ferrothorn or Regieleki. Obviously, one of those options, Politoed, can really be negated at this point. But the possibility of it being either Ferrothorn or Regieleki means that Warhyang has to play with a little bit of passiveness and trying to keep a cover for both of those Pokemon alive, while Angelo has all of the information that he needs on the Warhyang side of the field, knowing that it's the Landorus in the back alongside the Incineroar and Urshifu who hit the field here.
Yeah, definitely. That Urshifu not threatening a ton of damage into AngeloHunter's Urshifu, which is pretty healthy here, so should be able to just stay in here, potentially get a lot of damage onto the Incineroar, if not just KO it this turn.
Yeah, and the dangerous thing here for Warhyang is that if it's Incineroar switching into Landorus, that Landorus is also going to be eating a massive, super effective Surging Strikes that might actually just KO it right off the bat. So Warhyang kind of just has to go for the Fake Out into either the Urshifu slot or into the Incineroar slot if he chooses. However, he is going to opt to rather switch in that Landorus Incarnate and just hope that it can live this Surging Strikes that comes out, as Angelo's side of the field's Incineroar is going to go for the Fake Out onto Urshifu, preventing it from moving as the Surging Strikes goes out onto the Landorus slot, doing a massive amount of damage, and is going to be able to pick up the KO, leaving Warhyang in a 4 versus 2. Really, Angelo just has to work to pivot, possibly intimidate Cycle, and just bring out his strongest Pokemon here. Sorry, not a 4v2, a 3v2.
Yeah, it's definitely tough on Warhyang's end, even during that turn, because even if you Fake Out, you don't really manage to get a KO onto the Urshifu. You still gambling on what the last slot is. If it's Regieleki, then your Urshifu's in a lot of danger, and if it's Ferrothorn, you still have a little bit of trouble with it as well, so... interesting to see the Landorus switch, maybe predicting that it wasn't a Regieleki and that the Landorus wouldn't be too useful. Just trying to get some Intimidates and Fake Out pressure going on here, but it seems like it might be a little too late for that.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing, you know, the lack of Intimidate cycling that on Warhyang's side of the field compared to Angelo, who was constantly keeping his Pokemon moving, constantly making sure that there was no individual target that Warhyang could tackle down, as Angelo is going to be bringing out the Ferrothorn here as Incineroar fakes out the Urshifu, and depending on what the opposing Urshifu does, this could be a very beneficial turn for Warhyang, going for the Surging Strikes into the Ferrothorn slot. Unfortunately, with Iron Barbs, this is going to do a very large amount of damage back to Urshifu, and not a lot of damage to Ferrothorn, even with the critical hits and the 3 different hits, just because of how dang bulky it is.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that AngeloHunter's team has a lot of punishment for physical attackers on the other end, with the Rocky Helmet on Serena, and then you also have the Ferrothorn doing Iron Barb chip. So definitely puts up the Urshifu in the future.
Yeah, this team definitely seems like the perfect Urshifu counter. We have, obviously, as we've seen so far in this game, all of the Intimidate cycling that Angelo has done, really diminishing the damage output of the opposing Urshifu, and then bringing in Ferrothorns and Zarenas to really prevent it from doing a lot of damage while taking damage as well. As Ferrothorn goes for the Protect and against Urshifu's Surging Strikes, is Incineroar going to be doing a massive amount of damage and picking up another KO for Angelo's side of the field? Potentially. Actually, the Pinch Berry is going to activate here and bringing Incineroar back into yellow health. However, regardless, the Urshifu is going to be able to pick up the KO, leaving Warhyang in a 3 versus 2. Urshifu on Warhyang's side of the field is going to be going for these Surging Strikes, hoping to make something happen into the Ferrothorn again. However, taking that massive amount of Iron Barb's damage, is going to be able to hit through the Protect as its ability allows it to, but it might actually just die off of this Iron Barb's damage. It'll be close, but it seems like this might be the final turn, and it is actually. Urshifu is going to get taken down by all of that chip damage from the Zarena, from the Ferrothorn, just everything piling up overall, giving Angelo a pretty clean-cut victory there, allowing for him to take a commanding 1-0 lead and possibly in the position to just take the sweep and win fairly easily.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to see what Warhyang is able to adapt with the information that he managed to get in this game one. Definitely needs to preserve the Rillaboom to be able to take out that Scarfed Urshifu. Probably manage to deduce that Urshifu is choice locked in some type of way, especially if his own Urshifu is Scarf. So
Yeah, especially
I'd like to
noting
see the lead next turn.
Yeah, especially noting that there wasn't any sort of close combat play onto Ferrothorn, rather sticking with the Surging Strikes heavily indicates that it is going to be a choice Urshifu, because you don't really want to go for a grass move that makes contact 3 different times into the one and only Ferrothorn. So it'll be very interesting to see what the changes are going to be on both sides of the field, as Angelo might say, okay, there's a possibility that Landorus I does not come again because it didn't do a lot last game. Now I might have the freedom to bring Regieleki in, reading that switch, or might just stay down to basics and rinse and repeat kind of what he did, because that was just so incredibly dominating.
Yeah, definitely. Also, it'd be interesting to see if Warhyang decides to preserve his Landorus a little bit better, considering how his physical attackers are taking so much chip from both the Serena and the Ferrothorn every time they attack. If you manage to get like an Earth Power or a Sludge Bomb into those mons, then you won't be taking any chip and doing a ton of damage in return as well.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this next game plays out as we get started with it, because of just so many different possibilities. You know, that last game's ending left an open door for both sides of the field to kind of take advantage of the information that they gathered from the other opponent, or from the opponent at the beginning and the end of last game, as Warhyang is just going to keep the same lead, bringing in Rillaboom and Urshifu, and Angelo bringing in Zarina and Urshifu. Really just the battle of the grass types continues. You know, there's so many different possibilities, and knowing that Serena has the ability to bring in, or to come in and use Grassy Glide, even if it's not on the set, is a very threatening possibility for Warhyang, especially with the Urshifu being out.
Definitely. You would think that the Urshifu can survive one, but it's still a ton of damage that you might not want to take, so might go for a double U-turn into Serena would definitely be an interesting play here, but you do take the Rocky Helmet on both mons, and leave the Urshifu free to do it at once.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting interaction. If the combination of both the U-turns is able to pick up the KO, I would say that that's probably a definitely a play to go for. However, the possibility of it staying alive would probably keep Warhyang from making that play. Instead, he's opting to switch out Rillaboom into the Incineroar, coming in, dropping a layer of Intimidates onto both of these physical attackers, which, as we've seen, is just so incredibly beneficial. And if the Zarina leaves the field this turn, it will allow Incineroar to put that fake out pressure that it had previously. Urshifu going for the U-turn here, trying to bring in a different pivot for Angelo, deciding between both the Incineroar and the Ferrothorn, two very plausible options, is going to choose for the Ferrothorn instead, might be trying to bait the Incineroar to stay in and go for a different play, and Urshifu is going to be going for the Surging Strikes, potentially onto that Ferrothorn slot. It is, and again, that chip damage is really going to come into play here, as Iron Barbs is going to do a very sizable chunk after all 3 of these hits connect.
Yeah, definitely a very heads-up play from AngeloHunter there, considering that U-turn into Incineroar is pretty safe on his end, unless that this Urshifu goes for Surging Strikes into that slot, which Warhyang tried to read that Incineroar switch, and AngeloHunter really punished that by going into that Ferrothorn instead, getting a bunch of damage and managing the KO with the Power Whip here.
Wow, Angelo said, I am going to make the biggest reads, and you are going to stand there and take it. Essentially, just taking the massive KO on Urshifu, really allowing Ferrothorn to just kind of stand here and deal whatever it needs to, because this Incineroar likely won't be able to do a lot to it, as Warhyang brings in Porygon 2, exposing that final Pokemon on his side of the field, getting the download special attack boost. This could be a little bit interesting, because obviously we know that this Ferrothorn has Body Press and that incredibly high defense stat that it has, and Body Press is going to do a lot of damage to Porygon 2.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if Warhyang wants to go for the Trick Room here, because obviously you'll set up that Ferrothorn really well if you do go for it, but you will mitigate the damage coming out from the Urshifu in the back, so if he manages to take out the Ferrothorn here, then maybe the Trick Room is the way to go. But Ferrothorn actually just switches out into Incineroar here, putting on some fake out pressure for next turn.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if Warhyang decides that the Trick Room is worth it, because like you said, the threat of that Ferrothorn on the field is just so immense that it really wouldn't be worth it, I feel like, to go for that Trick Room, because you have answers for Urshifu, at least right now. You have that Rillaboom in the back that is able to do a massive amount of damage to it, potentially one-shot it, but you really don't have an answer for Ferrothorn. As Porygon 2 goes for the Thunderbolt, reading the Urshifu switch in, and is going to be getting a one-shot critical hit and getting the KO on Urshifu, evening out this game very quickly. What an incredible, not just the read to go for a Thunderbolt on Porygon 2, but also being able to get that critical hit and being able to get just an intense and very powerful move off and evening the score so quickly. Probably tilting Angelo a little bit in the process as well, as Rillaboom hits the field on Warhyang's side of the field, putting in a little bit more fake out pressure as Angelo says, okay, bring Ferrothorn back in, we can still bring this back.
Yeah, also that U-turn from the Incineroar going into what was the Ferrothorn slot, if that was a Flare Blitz or anything else, then it's not such a great turn for Warhyang, but he really got everything he could have got out of that turn, pivoting out the Incineroar into Rillaboom and KOing the Urshifu all in one.
Yeah, that was just an incredible kind of read back from Warhyang, just being able to do an immense amount of damage, but also pivot, but also do chip damage to the other slot in the field is just incredible. And Angelo wants to possibly save another cycle of fake out, switching Incineroar into Zarina, but another U-turn from Rillaboom comes out of Zarina and does nearly half of its health yet again, taking a little bit of chip damage in the process, but allowing Warhyang to pivot again and again, and just constantly keeping the pressure on Angelo by not only changing up what typing the opponents are, but also allowing for extra intimidates or for extra boosts or to reset the terrain possibly, as Porygon 2 goes for an Icy when getting the potential speed advantage to Incineroar and nearly KOing Zarina on its own because of another critical hit. This Porygon 2 is just a crit machine, doing everything that Warhyang could want it to, and potentially changing the tides of this game as Angelo goes for an Iron Defense, seeing that Warhyang's only threat for Ferrothorn is Incineroar with Flare Blitz, and Ferrothorn really just trying to stay alive and live as many of those as possible.
Yeah, even with that Iron Defense, that Incineroar is still going to be doing a fair bit of damage. If that Porygon keeps managing to crit, then maybe the Ferrothorn's in a lot of trouble here, but now he did manage to get the speed control going for the Icy Wind. Serena's going to be underspeeding the Incineroar most likely, and the Porygon is also able to just keep going for Icy Wind or whatever other attack it may want to go for.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. The speed tiers are going to be a bit questionable right now, seeing, like you said, that speed drop. Zarina should be underspeeding this Incineroar, which could allow Warhyang to pick up a free KO, or he might take that opportunity to just go for a massive Flare Blitz onto the Ferrothorn slot. So there's a lot of different possibilities that can come out from both sides of the field. However, it looks like Angelo is going to stick with his dual grass out on the field, try to keep the Incineroar from really doing a lot. However, actually, sorry, I must have misread the moves, but Angelo is going to be switching Zarina in for Incineroar, getting the Intimidate off onto Incineroar, really trying to make sure that Ferrothorn can stay alive from all these Flare Blitzes, and Ferrothorn is actually just going to protect, really wants to ensure that it can stay alive for as long as it can, as Porygon 2 going for a Thunderbolt into the Incineroar slot, just doing, again, more and more chip damage. Incineroar's U-turn is going to be doing the same, allowing Warhyang to bring that Rillaboom right back in. However, it's not really the best position for it, being a little bit threatened by both Incineroar and the Ferrothorn.
Definitely. Now that the Rillaboom's back on the field, it was a very good call on Warhyang's end to U-turn into what was the Serena slot, considering it was under threat of KO from the Icy Wind. But now Ferrothorn's free to go for another Iron Defense, just go for body press damage, because that Incineroar is not on the field. It's not going to be threatened by that 4-time super effective Flare Blitz anymore.
Yeah, and you know, this +2 Iron Defense, as you mentioned, might be able to pick up, 60-70% on Porygon 2. There's a lot of different possibilities, again, with how Angelo plays this, that this is still a very close fight, but it can very easily become one-sided, as he is going to go for that body press into Porygon 2, and we're going to see really how much damage this insanely bulky and strong Pokemon can do.
Yeah, actually opting to go for the parting shot into the Porygon 2, so interesting to see if we'll see any type of switch from WarhyangVGC, or if Rillaboom's just going to try to go for whatever little damage it can do into these two resisted Mons with a grass-type move, or just a U-turn perhaps.
Rillaboom going for the fake out there, going to be flinching to Ferrothorn, preventing any body press shenanigans from happening just quite yet. However, going to be taking more chip damage than it does to Ferrothorn, as Incineroar's parting shot comes out onto Porygon 2, dropping its stats a little bit, really trying to mitigate that damage output as Zarina hits the field again. Now, after that parting shot, Zarina might be able to just barely live this Icy Wind that comes out from Porygon 2. It'll be very interesting to see if that happens, and it does not. Zarina does get KO'd, and Ferrothorn's speed gets dropped yet again, as Incineroar will re-hit the field and will reactivate Intimidate, and will give it the ability to go for Fake Out again, but still an overall negative for Angelo.
Yeah, now that Serena's off the field especially, there's no type of mind games you can play with the switching into a Fake Out, nullifying it, going for damage with the Ferrothorn. Now, Ferrothorn doesn't care too much about the speed drops from the Icy Wind, but it is going to be under threat of just taking a bunch of attacks in a row. That Flare Blitz might be enough to finish it off after some chip later on.
Yeah, and Warhyang might just say, okay, I want to keep Rillaboom and Porygon 2 in to deal with the opposing Incineroar before the Incineroar on his side of the field comes in, just so the 1v1 between Incineroar and Ferrothorn can go a little bit smoother for his preferences, as this turn is going to be very, very impactful for the ending of this game, as the switch from Rillaboom is actually going to come out and bring the Incineroar back onto the field, getting, again, another round of Intimidate off. Not really going to make an impact for Ferrothorn, obviously using only its defense stat with Body Press. However, preventing Incineroar from doing a lot of damage back onto Porygon 2 is going to be really interesting, as Angelo goes for that Flare Blitz into the former Rillaboom slot, not going to be doing a lot to the incoming Incineroar, and Porygon 2's Thunderbolt into the Incineroar is going to be doing a sizable chunk, putting it under half health now, as Ferrothorn's Body Press reads the Incineroar switch and is going to be able to get the KO. Ferrothorn is no longer threatened really by anything on Warhyang's side of the field. Now, Ferrothorn is really free to either set up Leech Seeds or go for Body Presses. Really, he has a lot of versatility here. Not to mention the Incineroar on Angelo's side of the field, that still just exerts so much pressure onto Rillaboom, has the ability to go for parting shots into Porygon 2, and just does so much in general.
Yeah, that's such a huge KO for AngeloHunter here. Pretty safe play, considering that if the Rillaboom switches in, worst case you get Flare Blitz. If it survives that, the Body Press will take it out, and then the Incin comes in. Becomes a little bit more difficult, but reading that switch perfectly gets the KO on the Incin, which is the biggest threat to his Ferrothorn. We've seen from the Porygon 2, not too much to hit the Ferrothorn as well, especially after that parting shot, getting the damage mitigated. Just potentially Icy Wind or Thunderbolt, not going to be doing a ton, and getting definitely out-damaged by the Body Press in the long run.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what those other two moves on the Porygon 2 set are. Likely, I would guess Trick Room and Recover, but again, it just has so much variability, as Rillaboom is going to hit the field again on Warhyang's side of the field, set up another grassy terrain, as Angelo really just wants this Porygon gone finally. However, you know, Warhyang might be able to go for another Fake Out onto Ferrothorn and give himself another turn of livability. However, at this point, it seems pretty dire just by looking at the moves and everything that's happened so far in this game, because of just the types and the pressure that Angelo really is exerting right now.
Yeah, and that Rillaboom's grassy terrain is definitely going to be a hindrance for Warhyang here, because Ferrothorn with leftovers plus grassy terrain recovery every turn is going to be a huge menace. Even if you manage to just keep critting it, it's not super powerful attacks between Icy Wind, Thunderbolt, maybe a U-turn out of the Rillaboom. We haven't seen any other type of attack, so...
Yeah, Rillaboom coming out here, going for a Fake Out actually into the Incineroar slot, doing a decent chunk of damage, as Porygon 2 is also going to Incineroar, going to possibly put that into KO range next turn, trying to get the Incineroar gone. However, the Ferrothorn's Body Press is going to do a massive amount of damage. And interesting to note now is that because Porygon 2 has not exposed whether that last move is Recover or what that move could be, It's very possible that Porygon 2 tries to just continue to live by spamming Recover. However, Incineroar going for Flare Blitz into the Rillaboom slot means that that can't happen for too many more turns unless the chip damage from all the Flare Blitzes finally catches up to Incineroar and picks up a KO.
Yeah, now that that huge damage has been dealt to the Porygon 2, it's going to be very, very difficult because even if the Incineroar wasn't on the field, the Rillaboom's just going to keep taking Iron Barb's damage, maybe knock itself out before it takes out the Ferrothorn, or brings it low enough for the Porygon to be able to take it out. Now, Warhyang either has one turn left of the Porygon, or it's just going to be stuck going for a recover loop every turn.
Yeah, it seems like a losing battle, and it's possible that, you know, a critical hit could come out or something else that really just changes the tides, but it doesn't seem like it'll be likely. Rillaboom going for the Woodhammer, and Incineroar is going to be able to pick up the KO, making this a very close game, but this Ferrothorn might just be set up beyond repair as Porygon 2 goes for that recover, trying to repair its health, as the body press is going to be coming out onto it and is going to be doing yet another round of massive damage being left in that recover loop. And it looks like even if Porygon 2 goes for a recover here, it might get the KO. It looks like it's just on the cusp, and after grassy terrain recovery, it might be able to live with just a couple of hit points.
Yeah, I feel even if the Porygon lives, it's going to be super, super difficult because you're just stuck going for recover every turn. Again, the Rillaboom not doing too much into the Ferrothorn, especially at +2 defense, so that Porygon not too useful for Warhyang anymore. He's going to really have to hope for maybe a Thunderbolt para here, or some, like, 5 crits in a row or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing just the sheer utility of a move like Body Press on these defensive walls in Ferrothorn and a bunch of other Pokemon that we've seen in the past is just so useful because you are able to simultaneously boost your attack and your defense by 2 stages as if you're getting 2 bulk ups off in 1 turn. It is just so incredibly powerful and is just winning games on its own. Rillaboom going for a U-turn, not going to be doing anything after the recovery, taking more damage in Iron Barbs itself, as Porygon 2 goes for another round of recover, just hoping to potentially live this on a couple of hit points. However, it will be close, as Ferrothorn going for that body press is going to be able to get the KO, and Rillaboom versus Ferrothorn in a losing battle. It looks like Angelo will get this set 2-0.
Yeah, very well played on AngeloHunter's end here. That Iron Defense on the Ferrothorn is super pivotal early on in the game because if you don't get that set up, you probably don't out-damage that recover from the Porygon, but now that you did, Porygon just in a horrible spot, getting taken out with a body press every turn, like doing 60-70%, a lot of damage.
Yeah, and you know, it feels like this match was really boiling down to team diff. All 3 of the special attackers on Warhyang's side of the field, Porygon 2, Landorus Incarnate, and Sylveon, all 3 of those are resisted by Ferrothorn. So not really seeing any offensive utility from those mons in this battle, but also not seeing even the physical side of the field. You know, Incineroar and Urshifu having super effective damage. However, because of those iron defenses that were, you know, brought up, it wasn't able to really come through and do a lot. And that really ended up being the difference between this game and a potential 3-game set with Warhyang taking this game. Body Press is going to be coming out from Ferrothorn on a Rillaboom and basically seals the fate of it. If it hadn't already been sealed, it will be going down next turn unless a miracle happens.
Yeah, it was interesting to see on Warhyang's end, just bringing a super bulky team into this game, but lacking the damage, really, like you were saying earlier. The Incineroar is really your only hope against the Ferrothorn outside of some crits with the Porygon. But Warhyang just goes for the forfeit here, and now AngeloHunter seals up the win with a 2-0 victory.
Yeah, just excellently played by AngeloHunter. Just very well done to give his team, the Sunsteel Strikers, the lead in this incredibly close set between the Sunsteel Strikers and Lunala Dream Eaters, now leading 4-3. It'll all come down to the final match between Kiso and Equidude. Really going to be deciding whether this match is a tie or a victory for Sunsteel Strikers that would be much needed. But Angelo did his part, played incredibly well, and unfortunately for Warhyang, his team just did not have the tools to deal with that Ferrothorn alongside the other pressure that Zarina, Incineroar, and Urshifu brought out.
Yeah, I'm sure AngeloHunter will be very happy to be able to secure a draw against the Lunala Dream Eaters, who are doing very well with the 4 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss record. Sunseal Striker is also doing very well. Hopefully, they'll be able to take that win here.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. However, we have a couple, or I believe one more match left for the stream, so we will be taking a short break and we will come back with that final match.